Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Thank you. Welcome to the second National Maker Faire in Washington, D.C. Thank you all for being here. It's already been a busy day yesterday, and we'll have, we expect at least 10 to 15,000 people here checking out makers from all over. I wanted to give you a short presentation, tell you a little bit about what we're doing, why we're here, maybe, and then also get some talks from other folks here. And really, it's all in the form of a welcome and an orientation. I think some of you may know a lot about the maker movement, and others, I think you might be seeing it for the first time, and we welcome, both groups of folks. We're all leaders of this global maker movement, and I think that's why we get together like this. Is we're all doing different things, but I think the power of the maker movement, in many ways, is it's distributed, it's self-organized, but it's highly collaborative in new ways. So the more ways that, even as leaders, that we can work together to facilitate and shape and point, direction, give direction to the maker movement. These are all things that I think we're trying to do. But mostly, I think, from my point of view, we're trying to give the opportunity to people in the maker movement to be recognized, to be visible, and to see the work that they're doing. And out of that, they find new ways to collaborate with each other, and they find new opportunities. In many ways, this kind of started back when Joey Hootie came to the White House at the science fair. And if you haven't ever seen the video, you probably should, because this is an extreme marshmallow cannon that Joey showed at a Bay Area Maker Faire, brought it to the White House, and at the gate, the Secret Service told him, "You cannot shoot that here." But the president then walked up and said, "Does that work?" And Joey says, "Yes, can I show you?" And the expression on the president seeing a marshmallow shot across the room was priceless. And but that led to, in 2014, the National Maker Faire, the White House Maker Faire. And that was quite, I think, an occasion. Many of you in this room were there. We had makers throughout the White House. And I have to say, I felt a little bit like throwing a party in your grandmother's house, that you're kind of worried that people might spill something on the carpet or do something to the portraits on the wall, but everything went really smoothly. But out of that, and we'll hear from Tom and Megan later, the White House really has been a kind of a steward of the maker movement here in the United States, helping with that. Stephanie Santoso, I haven't seen Stephanie, is she here? It was the first White House Maker Liaison for making, and now it's Andrew Coy. Where's Andrew? Andrew, there's Andrew. So give a shout out to Andrew. He's done all the organizing of the many events before and after National Maker Faire. But I also kind of, want to point out, I'm really proud that Maker Faire, and really the maker movement, is spreading around the world. We will have 190 Maker Fairs around the world this year, and 40 different countries. And for the most part, these are organized by volunteers, sometimes partner organizations, but we had actually many of them here yesterday for a meeting at the White House, from Milwaukee and Pittsburgh and different Honolulu, different cities going on. So pretty much every weekend from about April till October, there's multiple Maker Fairs going on around the world. And it's pretty interesting to see it spread across languages and cultures. I was in March at Maker Faire Cairo. In its second year, had over 10,000 people. And to, really the first Maker Faire in an Arabic-speaking country. And I'd say everybody was about 20 years old, both the attendees and the makers there. And it was such great energy and enthusiasm. It felt like the first couple years of Maker Fairs in the U.S. It just, this was new, fresh. Everybody really wanted to get involved. And I think we're seeing that attitude around the world. But we also have 4 Maker Fairs that are over 100,000 people. Bay Area, New York, Shenzhen, China, and Rome, Italy. So Shenzhen still coming up this year, and as is Rome. We also produce ourselves an online maker camp, which started about 4 years ago, and something which sort of has grown out of the community wanting this a school maker fair. And it really started because we saw people just doing it, and we thought, well, we want to help it out, and we created a playbook and tried to provide support for people just organizing a maker fair on a school level. So we don't necessarily know how they get to make projects or in what context, but we want to celebrate that that's happening really at even a school level. So it's really interesting to see this come together. You know, maker spaces, I think, are the other big important thing that are happening. I don't really have a good number on this. I'm guessing there's 2,000 maker spaces in the US, but it's a rough guess. And I'm trying to put this up. Yesterday, Felton from Cleveland Public Library said that there were 57 maker spaces in libraries a couple years ago, and he thought now, you know, roughly there were 200. I think there's more than that, frankly, but you know, this sort of gets to like this last number. I don't know what the number is in school maker spaces, but I believe it's pretty sizable and growing. We need more research into looking at just some of these basic counts and keeping track of them, because nobody, you know, nobody necessarily registers a makerspace and says, I'm online. And we've also seen, you know, the media. This is the Intel show, America's Greatest Makers. You could look at some other things like BattleBots as examples of highlighting makers in popular culture. And this is, we have John here from Kickstarter, but I think one of the indicators that we've used that's fascinating is how many projects are run through Kickstarter for makers to start products and companies. And John can give us more detail on that, but it's a fascinating number of people that are participating just in maker fairs and maker projects that sometimes they come to Maker Faire to help launch a project, to organize, get the community know about what they're doing. But this is a real source of funding for small companies that didn't exist prior. And you know, they probably wouldn't get this money from venture capital. They wouldn't get it from their local bank. So they're getting it from the community. And I think that almost points out to what the power of the maker movement is not such building a product or a service, but building a community around that product or service. And we see, you know, specific things, you know, on Kickstarter. Lisa Federman's Numiku, and I just wrote a story on Lisa recently, but you know, she's just someone that wanted to do sous vide cooking, which is an immersion cooking in water, and it's something that was available in industrial settings, and it was expensive. She wanted to do it herself. She started with a DIY version, a kit version, and then eventually created a consumer product and raised $750,000 on Kickstarter to do that, and I think went back on and has raised more. Glowforge is an example of, look at that, $27 million raised on that. We're in the wrong business, I'm sorry. You know, to create a new kind of laser cutter. We've often said that people go to maker spaces for the 3D printer, but they stay for the laser cutter, and because it's really easy to use, it's practical, but the Glowforge folks thought it was, rightly, that it was too expensive and a little bit too hard to use. So they were able to innovate with a new idea and find support before they even had shipped the product, which is kind of fascinating. So, but I think we're also seeing organizations begin to tap into the maker community as a source of innovation. And Jeff is here from GE Lighting, working with us. We're using a Hackster.io platform to solicit project ideas for the future of lighting. And I think there's a really interesting thing going on with organizations looking out and saying, how do we interact with the maker community? How do we tap into this almost what I call innovation in the wild? It's just out there. People have great ideas. You wouldn't look for them, you know, necessarily to hire them. You wouldn't necessarily know that they're in the place that they are, but they want to participate, and we can organize that. And then there's, you know, Amkar Govil is an 8-year-old who built his own smartwatch platform, you know, and he funded it on Kickstarter. And he did it so that kids could have a platform to experiment on, right? Not an expensive Apple Watch, but a relatively, DIY version. You could 3D print it, you could put the pieces together, and he wants to use it to teach kids how to code and design things. So this stuff bubbles up from the maker movement, and it's fascinating. But which I think innovation in itself I think matters, but I think we also see beyond that some other things happening. So an example is the prosthetics efforts here to develop artificial hands, prosthetic hands, develop other things. And what I like is so many of these examples are a parent getting involved in recognizing they could create their own 3D printed hand for their son or daughter. And this gives them a range of options, even to custom. I had a father from Cincinnati come to a maker fair and brought his son and held up his hand, and it wasn't just a prosthetic hand, it had some Batman logo on it, right? And so they're able to really transform a prosthetic from just a functional thing into something that carries meaning and becomes cool. And then Dara's here, and some of the work she's doing, she's one of the champions of change. We have several in the room here, all of them I could talk about. But just the idea of using 3D printing in Haiti to 3D print, what do you call it, an umbilical closure? An umbilical cord clamp. But here's one of the things, like, yes, we could just supply a box of umbilical cord clamps to Haiti, but instead, she and Field Ready, as a group, get in there and teach people how to do this so that they can, the clamp is just one example of what you could do with this. And then you begin to think, what else could you do in these environments to solve your own problems? And I think one of the really big messages of the maker movement is helping people help themselves, right? Not doing everything for people, but letting them really participate in the change themselves. Sorry. Peter is here, and Peter and I have worked on this Maker City book. We think that the maker movement has these distinctly local properties, such as maker spaces, getting together informally to collaborate. Things like schools, you have to deal with them on a local level. You can't just, say one thing. So, Greg's here from Pittsburgh, and we covered Greg Bear from the Remake Learning Network or Council. And what I'm really fascinated by is Greg started that whole effort, a whole transformation out of a pancake breakfast. He said there's a bunch of people, we all have something in common, I'm going to bring you together, we'll have pancakes. We did donuts and pastries here, but it's to some degree these informal settings where you meet people and you begin to realize you have a common vision, common goals, and you can work together as individuals and then as organizations get behind that. And so I think those are patterns that we see happening in cities, and we want to promote that because I think what this can-do attitude is that we talk about in the book is something that is kind of missing in national politics. People feel almost helpless and detached, if not angry, about what's happening. But on a local level, they feel like things can happen. We can make change. Oh, I'm going faster here. So our mission, certainly the company that I lead and what we're trying to do, and I hope it's your mission as well, in part, to create positive change in the world by inspiring and empowering everyone to become a maker. And I think that everyone is really the goal. It's a hard challenge, but it starts with believing that it's possible, believing that everybody has this in them, that it's not a few people that are talented out there that do this, but everybody that gets exposed to this has something to offer. They have their own ideas, and empowering them means they get to do what they want, And if you think of that just in the vein of education, it means giving control to students, to letting them create and produce, not what they're told to do, but what they're inspired to do. So this is what we're about and what we're trying to, I think, create through our maker fairs. And sometimes what I really enjoy is just, we made them to be family events. We get families there. And it's pretty remarkable. I don't know honestly how we're all holding together, but we have wonderful sponsors there, some of them very high-tech companies. And we have, consumer brands, and we have makers who are often have very raw projects there. But it's fun, exciting, and it seems to just connect to people and remind them this is possible. This is something that they can do. So I really, we can do so much together as leaders in this room, working together. And I think the purpose of this breakfast, I leave you, one thing is the together word. Like we could each do something ourselves, and you should, but what happens when we pool our resources, when we set goals together? You know, as proud as I am of where the maker movement has gone, there's so much more to do. And you know, we need to be self-critical about what we haven't achieved, where we haven't gone. But we have this remarkable window to make change, and the change is happening. And so how do we support that and enable it? Not by necessarily doing everything for everybody, but really inspiring and connecting them together so they can do more themselves. So thank you very much for being here, and I really want to hope you see some of this at Maker Faire today. You know, that's what we're trying to celebrate here at Maker Faire, and work with you to expand it and share it with more people. So thank you all for coming today, and enjoy Maker Faire. Thank you.